Volume 3. Scriptural Translation. Part C. 13 Main Figures, 4 Auxiliaries. 1. Shi Faxian of Shin Temple, in Zhongling, during the Liu Song dynasty. Shi Faxian, with the original surname Gong, was a native of Wuyang, Pingyang. He had 3 brothers who died young. His father feared that misfortune would fall on Faxian as well, so he let him join the monastic order as a novice. At the age of 3. Later, Faxian lived at home for a few years. One time, he was seriously ill and about to die. However, after returning to the monastery, he recovered within 3 days. After that, he would not go back home again. His mother, who missed her son, thus built a cabin outside their house, so that he could stay in it when passing by them. His father died when Faxian was 10. His uncle asked him to rejoin worldly life since his mother lived alone. Faxian responded, "I took refuge in Buddhism because I intended to be aloof from worldly affairs, not for my father's reason." His uncle thought his words made sense and would not force him anymore. Before long, his mother passed away as well. Transcending ordinary people's emotions, Faxian returned to the temple right after the funeral. He once reaped rice with dozens of school friends. Some hungry thieves tried to steal their grains. The other students ran away, while Faxian stayed calm and told the thieves, "If you would take some grains, go ahead, but you suffer from hunger, because you have never practiced dana before." He returned after saying that. Then, the thieves dropped the rice and left. Hundreds of monks were amazed by Faxian's deed. After being ordained, he aspired with clear vision and behaved strictly according to the precepts and rites. He always bemoaned the incompletion of Buddhist sutras and sastras in China, therefore resolving to search for them himself. In the 3rd year of Long'an period in the Jin dynasty, along with school friends named Weijing, Daozhong, Weiying, and Weiwei among others, Faxian left Chang'an and traveled westwards. Across the desert, where birds and animals were all but extinct, they saw nothing but sand. Hence it was impossible to know their location. Only by the sun and bones of the dead could they tell the direction. Heat waves and devil ghosts frequently appeared, which led people to death in the desert. Faxian had already given himself to predestiny and moved forward courageously without withdrawal. Soon, they arrived at the Pamirs, where snow stayed all year round and evil dragons breathed out poisonous gas. Rain pouring heavily and wind blowing wildly, blended with sand grains, the mountainous path was extremely dangerous, with cliffs that towered into the sky. Previously, people had made stone ladders on the mountains. Faxian and his company went over 700 such stone ladders. They also stepped on ropes to cross river valleys over a dozen times. Zhang Qian and Gan Ying in the Han dynasty had never been to such places. When they crossed a small snow mountain, freezing wind was blowing. Weijing, feeling too cold to move forward, told Faxian, "I am dying. Please continue and do not die here." He then snuffed out. Faxian stroked him and cried, "Your aspiration is not realized. This is fate. What can we do to alter it?" Moving on alone, he crossed the snowy mountain, thereby having traveled across over 30 countries. Close to India, around 15 miles away from Rajagra, Faxian came across a temple at dusk. He planned to reach Mount Gurdrakuta the next morning. Monks in the temple dissuaded him from going. The path to the peak is perilous. Black lions have come there to eat people several times. You would be unable to arrive at your destination. Faxian replied, "I came from 10,000 miles away for the objective of reaching the Vulture Peak. On my way I encountered unimaginable hardship and danger. No accomplishment was guaranteed. Why should I give up the endeavor of years when I am close to my goal? Although it is dangerous, I am not afraid." Failing to stop him, the monastics sent 2 monks to accompany him. When Faxian arrived at the foot of the mount, it was getting dark. They prepared to stay there overnight, yet the 2 monks returned out of fear. Staying alone, Faxian burned incense and paid homage to the Buddha. He was touched by the remains of the Buddha, like he had seen the Buddha himself. At night, 3 black lions came and squatted in front of him, looking at him while licking their tongues and wagging their tails. Faxian focused on sutra recitation and mindfulness of the Buddha. The lions lowered their heads to his feet. The master stroked their fur and chanted the mantra, saying, "If you want to hurt me, you will have to wait until the end of my recitation. If you just want to test my devotion, you had better go back soon." The 3 lions stayed for a long time and then left. The next day, Faxian returned from the mount. The path came to an end, and he could only go along a rough track. Walking less than 1 mile on the track, he saw a practitioner in his 90s with simple and coarse clothes yet an extraordinary countenance. Faxian was impressed by the latter's nobleness. However, he did not realize his sainthood. Later, he met a young monk and asked, "Who was the elder I just passed by?" The young monk replied, "Buddha's great disciple Kasyapa." Faxian felt regret and returned to chase after him until the entrance of a cave, which was blocked by a huge stone. Faxian could not get in and had to give up with tears in his eyes. He continued his journey and arrived in Samkasya. A white-eared dragon dealt well with the monks of this country and promised to make the harvest a bumper. Every year it was efficacious. Monks built a house and offered food to the dragon. Each year, when the summer retreat concluded, the dragon turned into a small snake with white ears, so the monks could tell that it was the dragon. They put cheese in a bronze bowl and let the snake get in. After they passed the bowl from the front row to the rear, the dragon left. It happened once per year. Faxian thus had seen the dragon in person. Later on, Faxian came to central India. At South Heavenly King Monastery, next to the pillar of Asoka in Pataliputra, Magadha, he acquired the Mahasamjika Vinaya, the commentary on Sarvastivadin Vinaya, the Samyukta Bidharmardaya Sastra, the Yanjing, and the Vaipulya Sutra of Nirvana with other texts. Faxian dwelt there for 3 years, studying the Sanskrit language and texts. He also transcribed sutras himself. Faxian then followed traders and got into the state of lion, among a dozen fellow travelers. Some stopping on the way and others dying, he was the only one that kept on going, which made him sad. Once, he saw a Chinese white fan placed in front of a jade Buddha statue as a tribute by traders. He could not help crying. Faxian stayed in the state of lion for 2 years, acquiring the Mahisasaka Vinaya, the Durgagama Sutra, the Samyuktagama Sutra, the Kasudraka Pitaka, and some other texts which all did not exist in China. Later, he went back to China with a fleet of traders that had over 200 people on board. They once encountered a storm on the ocean, and everyone was frightened, throwing items into the sea to save the vessels that began to take on water. Worried about the scriptures and the Buddha's images, Faxian recited the name of Bodhisattva Guanxian wholeheartedly and took refuge in the Chinese Sangha. The fleet passed through the storm without further harm. 10 days later, they arrived in Yavadvipa and stayed there for 5 months. Faxian went with another fleet to Guangzhou. After about 20 days on the sea, one night, a storm arose. The traders were scared and discussed. "We have this trouble because a monk is on board. We shall not wait for death for his reason." They wanted to leave Faxian on an island. The one sponsoring Faxian reprimanded them. "If you want to put the monk on the island, then put me there too, or just kill me." Chinese emperors respect monks. I will tell His Majesty what you do, and he will punish you." The traders stared at one another and gave up the thought unwillingly. At that time, they ran out of food and fresh water and had to float following the wind. When they reached the shore, looking at the vegetation on the land, Faxian knew that they were in China but was not sure about the exact region. They harbored the ships and found a village, where Faxian saw two hunters and asked where they were. The hunters answered, "The southern bank of Laoshan in Chongguang Prefecture, Qingzhou." After returning, the hunters reported this affair to the prefect, Li Yi, who always worshipped the Buddha. He then welcomed them in person, as soon as he heard about the monks' arrival from afar. Therefore, Faxian went back along with the prefect, carrying all the scriptures and Buddhist images. Before long, Faxian wanted to return southwards. The prefect of Qingzhou tried to keep the master with him for the winter. The traveler responded, "I threw myself into remoteness and danger, despite the risk of being unable to come back, just in the hope of transmitting the Dharma. My aspiration is not fulfilled, so I cannot stay." He then went to the capital city, along with the foreign monk named Buddhabhadra. He translated the Mahasamjika Vinaya, the Vaitulya Sutra of Nirvana, and the Samyukta Bidharma Hridayasastra, among other texts, totaling over 1 million words. Owing to Faxian's efforts in translating the Maha-Nirvana Sutra, the public thereby benefited from the teaching in China. A family whose surname was unknown lived near the Zouk gate of the capital, in which Buddhism was practiced, and recited this sutra. The family members stored it with other books as they did not have a separate scripture room. Later, the house caught fire through the wind, and all their property was burned to ash except for this sutra, which remained completely intact. The incident was widely spread in the capital city. People were astounded by the miracle. The rest of the scriptures that Faxian carried back were, however, not translated. Faxian moved to Jingzhou afterwards and passed away in Shin Temple at the age of 86. Everyone lamented his demise. His journey in the Western countries was recorded in a separate travelogue.